All right, everyone, welcome to my channel. Saturday morning, and the reason why I'm doing this video is I didn't really do a video wrapping up the week and looking at the weekly charts. I want to make a habit of doing a end of the week wrap up video. So going forward, my Saturday videos for the most part I think are going to be end of the week wrap up videos. That's what this video is going to be. We're going to look at the weekly charts, which when you're thinking about weekly charts, you're looking at the bigger picture concepts, and the more major trends will present themselves on the weekly chart. So think of the weekly charts like a big ocean barge. Once it starts to turn directions, it won't, it's going to continue down that major direction for a while. So that is how we're going to approach these weekly charts. Let's get right into it. Leave me a thumbs up if you find some value in the content as well. I do appreciate that. All right, so Nasdaq Futures. Here's the daily right here, and I just want to point this out real quick. Someone in my comments said that my middle of the trading day videos basically said that they don't capture what actually always happens, because there's items that can happen, things that can happen after the videos. I understand that. It's kind of a risk reward, it's a give and take. I put out the videos during the market open in hopes that perhaps it gives everyone kind of a basic read on where the market is at that point in time. And then they can, you need to be able to, as you learn, you need to be able to read what's happening the rest of the trading day, maybe looking at those levels that I'm pointing out. But then it gives you time to act as well. And that's really the key. I like to leave people opportunity to actually take the information that I'm putting out and potentially act on it if they think it makes sense. Of course, everything in this video is just my opinion, but I want to give everyone an opportunity to see what I'm showing them. And then, I take positions based on the levels that I'm reading. And if I tell you at the end of the day, the opportunity might be gone, or, by the time you see the opportunity, the next day comes around and something's drastically changed. If you're going to have a big sell-off, you might wake up the next day to a huge gap down. Does it make sense to sell, to short or to, take action after a big drawdown? Well, possibly not. So for me, it's, I do understand that, end of the day videos would capture all the price action of the day. On a Friday, though, I think that, end of the day Friday action oftentimes is, very easily fadeable. And that's the one thing I also want to point out here on the Qs. If you go here, this price action right here, you can see it right here. These couple days, all of this up move on these days were really made by the futures market. And I pointed that out at the time in my videos. Each time we were moving higher, it was really just gapping up in the overnight futures market, moving higher, and then the Qs would gap up, and then the trading didn't go anywhere. And I told everyone that's fadeable price action. When you have up move only being made in the very thinly traded futures market, it's easily to fade. When the institutions decide to sell, they can crush that market down, because that market moved up on really, there's no strength. And that's exactly what happened this week. The institutional money basically sold it down and easily took out that up move. So that is, just understand that price action. When you see that kind of price action, it's suspicious. And we closed the day. It was the lowest daily close on the Qs of the week. So now let's flip over to these weekly charts. All right, Qs here, going back to the Nasdaq Futures real quick. So you can see here on the weekly chart, here's your uptrend right here. This is very easy to see. I think anybody could draw this out, and it's, my trend line on the weekly chart is close enough that you can get the concept that we have cleanly and clearly broken trend. And on the weekly chart, you can see here we had a lower weekly close. So we're making lower lows, lower highs on the weekly chart. That sets in motion a downtrend. And, we can have an up week. But this is not, I don't view this as just a correction, because the thing is that here's what I think. If this is going to remain a bull market in the tech sector, and it's clearly still in a bull market in the tech sector, because here's basically your 2009 lows here, and I've drawn this price channel right here, and this is the bull market channel that we've been in since 2009. So if it's going to remain in this bull market in tech, it almost has to go into a bear market first. And to do, because we could easily come all the way down to the bottom of the range here, down 25% from the highs. That's going to be, because tech got really far, really got it over its skis, but that would be a down 35% from the highs, depending on when you get there. Could be all the way here. We don't know when it's going to get there, but you could remain within this up channel here and still kind of have a small little bear market. But again, the bull and the bear market concepts I don't think they're relevant anymore. I think just following trends, down 20% is ambiguous. What's 20%? Why does it have to be 20%? Nobody knows. So I think that we could come down to the bottom of the price channel and still keep the bullish longer term trend intact. But again, we have set a new trend from this little trend right here that we've been in all of 2020. So here's 2020. Now, yeah, we could have a back test week. I'm not, throwing that out there. Could easily be some price action that runs us up and does a back test. But the larger trend is now to the downside, because this was your trend of 2020, your uptrend basically. That trend's broken. So back tests to resistance are, kind of a sell the rip opportunity. Moving on to the Qs real quick. And it's really the same look as the futures. So, same thing. That we're in a downtrend. You can see we made a lower close right here on the weekly. Now, this is longer term kind of stuff. So, the daily and the hourly charts are, I really look at those to try to get great positioning or catch bounces, things like that. But the weekly gives you your big barometer to tell you that, where the major trend, where the river, which direction is the current flowing. And, we broke trend, this was your uptrend, and then we broke and we're making new lower lows. Let's move on to the SPY, same deal. Here's your SPY. I can't draw the SPY line in any way that doesn't have this price action that we had over the last 3 weeks breaking that trend line. So I'm going to leave my trend line right here. I think it captures the most data points on the weekly chart. We broke the trend, had a lower close right there. So that's the basic markets. Let's look at the small caps too. And same deal really. This on the weekly, I could adjust this maybe to something like this. And small caps was actually one of the more bullish indices this week. Most of the selling took place in tech, and that's why I've been so focused on tech the last couple weeks, is because I noticed the potential weakness that could happen there. So I've been focusing on that. And tech will drag down the SPY, but tech's not necessarily in the IWM. So IWM had, it's going sideways basically. But I don't expect IWM to go anywhere. If you don't have the large caps moving up, then the small caps aren't going to move up either. In general, of course. Here's UVXY, and I've been pointing that I don't trade the volatility indexes often. But when I see opportunity, I do like to focus on them. And here's the point. And I was listening to another YouTube channel, a trading guy called Theo Trade. And he's an options person. And I don't trade options, but I do like to hear his kind of macro read on the markets. And, I think that's important to take in different opinions. And so check that guy out if you're interested. But he was pointing out that there's no, and this is what I was saying also, that there's no spike in volatility. There's been no spike in volatility. Volatility actually closed the week lower. So we're seeing lower volatility while tech and the markets are continuing to sell off. There's no fear in the markets right now. Basically, no one ever, the market, that tells me that everyone or the market participants think that this is just a small correction. The market is, potentially done selling off and that's it. But that's usually not how, if I go back to the Qs, we had this huge spike up on the weekly all the way up here, and we had a really low put to call ratio. So everyone was only buying calls, and that hasn't been unwound yet. What that's telling me is that the buy the dip traders are still there, and they haven't been shooken off of their positions. And so that tells me the selling's not done, and what I'm looking for is the spike in volatility. When you see the big spike in volatility, that will start to tell you that, okay, this trade, this sell-off is starting to unwind itself, and you'll start to see, impulsive selling to the downside, and that usually will signal kind of the end of the move. But until we see that, I think there's more downside, because we have not seen any of that fear and unwinding of that extremely bullish positioning. And that's what I'm looking for. So that's why I'm interested in volatility, because I think that, yes, we could come down here in this UVIX. Maybe we get down here next week, down to this 15 level. And again, that would be an area to potentially go long. The way I trade volatility, I don't just buy all my position all at once. What I do is I build a position over time, because volatility, you don't know when it's going to spike, and you don't really know if it's going to spike, but there's a high probability that we will get a good spike. But I don't know when it's going to happen, and oftentimes volatility will just drift lower, kind of crunch lower over time, and then you get a big massive spike. So you don't know when that's going to happen, so you have to build your position, and then when you get the big massive spike, I sell into that. But we don't have that yet, so I'm still building that position. And again, I don't take full-size positions like that, like I would take on the triple Qs or NVDA or some sort of a stock. I'm not taking that size in volatility. I would prefer I short sell stock, triple Qs or something like that, and then I'll add some volatility to the trade. Weekly chart on this, so obviously lower week, so I'm looking for that spike here at some point. Bonds, BND, there's just nothing going on in the bond market, just sideways. So again, there's no safety trade happening right now. There's just selling in tech, but nobody's, there's no fear, essentially. Gold, again, just crunching within this triangle, so this is ready to break one way or the other, up or down, but there is, there's no position taking, there's no fear, essentially. People aren't running into gold as a safety trade right now, which is interesting. Same with the dollar on the weekly, basically another sideways week. So, we're kind of compressing in all these charts, looking for some sort of a direction, and the selling really took place in triple Qs. But again, triple Qs and tech was the leader to the upside. Perhaps it's the leader to the downside. So we'll see that the selling potentially intensify in the tech, kind of those large cap FANG stocks and tech in general. And then we'll see the rest of the market start to catch up to the downside. And that could be in play where tech's leading to the downside. The financials. So financials have broken trend. They are drifting sideways. A lot of the time, this chart, when I see this kind of chart, you know what this tells me it's going to do. I've seen this set up many times on a daily chart, or an hourly chart. But oftentimes what happens when you break trend and you drift sideways, you're going to gap down. It's going to come in the form of some sort of a gap. You'll gap maybe like that, or, maybe not that much on a weekly chart, but you're going to gap down, and that will set in motion the downside move. We're not seeing that price action yet, but I have seen this a lot of the times where it gaps down. So look for that. I'd put a higher probability that happens, but of course you could always back test. There's always a chance as well. But again, for me, I would just look for objective entry. An objective entry on this would be the gap down would be a good objective entry because that's your sell signal, basically. I mean, your sell signal was a break of trend, so you could take it there and then add to it when you have a gap down or add to it when you have a back test. That's basically how I would play it. And, you'd want to set a stop somewhere above the trend line. So if they actually recover the trend line, you would want to stop out. Here's another look on tech, much like triple Qs, but without Amazon. And again, so you can see that tech had a weekly close, a lower weekly close. So again, lower highs, lower lows on the weekly. That is a downtrend. I don't think we've seen the selling yet. So we could have a green week, but I still think that there's going to be some sort of impulsive selling week that plays out here before this is all said and done. Apple. So it's obvious here that Apple's uptrend is broken. I mean, it's really not any more clear. You have a clean, uptrend line. See all the green candles, just solid weekly gains every single week, just consistent with a few selling weeks, but nothing like what we've seen up here. This is 4 down weeks in a row. You can't find anything like that. And if you roll back, you can't find anything really 4 down weeks in a row in Apple until you get to, back here in October of 2018. Even back here in the crash of, 2020 here, we didn't have 4 down weeks. So consistent selling essentially in Apple. And we didn't see that till 2018. And, that from the highs to the lows, we dropped a total of 40%. And Apple, as of right now, is down from the high to where it's at right now, about 22%. So could be, another 20% or so in selling. Could easily get down to the bottom of this trend line right here on the weekly. And I get that back from the 2002 lows right here. It just tagged it right up in here. So we've got, a low here, and we've got a reaction there, here, and here. So maybe we're going to come down and tag that. Bringing us down to that would be a drop of, 37%. So, or depending on when you get there, of course. Another thing to keep an eye on is the volume. You can see we're starting to kind of have some elevated selling volume on the weekly, but we don't have that big rush for the exit volume. Maybe something like this. So if you start to see a candle where we start getting volume, way up here in the upper end of the range, that might pair up with a big down move and kind of that capitulatory selling action that could signal kind of the near-term bottom or the end of whatever this down move is for the duration of time. Microsoft here, and again, I'm just looking at things from a weekly perspective. So we can have an up week. It's not going to potentially change the trend that we're in. Microsoft here, if I draw it out on a weekly, I've got the lows here. I could draw that out. Not the cleanest, but maybe that's what it is. Microsoft doesn't have as clean of an uptrend like Apple has, but there's no way I can draw a trend line that hasn't broken. I could draw something like this, maybe. We've still broken whatever I can draw on the weekly. So narrowing into the week, this price action here, you can see close the week kind of a marginally new lower week right there, a lower close than the previous support. So we broke support just barely. They tried to recover it late on Friday. I was watching that. They still weren't able to recover resistance, and resistance still held. So we had to close below resistance on the weekly, a new lower week below this kind of support range here on the weekly. Tells me that, maybe Monday we get a little kick up. Monday, maybe start the week off early, we get some sort of a little bounce up, but then ultimately throughout the week next week have a lower week or some sort of down day. I think we're going lower, basically, is what I'm trying to point out on Microsoft. Amazon, pretty impulsive selling week right there. That's a nice red week. And with a close, basically, Amazon did not necessarily close below its support. I saw some support right around here, and if I go to the daily here, you can see it. It's a lot more clean. There's your daily support right there at about 29.33. And so we basically closed just slightly above that. Going back to the weekly, a new lower low in this trend right here, but, you know, held some support on the weekly. Google, break of support. It's very obvious here. You can see here's some support on the weekly, and we had a clean break of that support, a close below that support. Tells me there's more selling coming. Couple that with the, and you have a gap right here as well in the weekly. So you can see we didn't quite hit that gap, didn't quite fill that gap. But couple the price action that you're seeing here with the lack of volatility increase, and just tells me there's more selling. You know, there's not enough fear. There's not enough capitalization. The bullish trend that we just saw has not been unwound yet. So that just that's my read on that. And Tesla on the weekly, I'm interested in this one because I think there's a real opportunity for a good short here. But again, you know, we haven't broken the trend yet on Tesla. It's still in an uptrend. And on the weekly, this tells me that we just had a kind of a positive week. So here's kind of your weekly trend. It's right about there. And that's not been broken yet. So still in a bullish weekly trend. That's it on that one for the weekly chart. NVDA, when you look at this one on the weekly chart, it's pretty obvious that we're just starting a downtrend. You can see we have this uptrend here, this kind of bearish. And if I tighten this up on the weekly, it's something like up here. But you can see we had this bearish rising wedge. Had the fake out move right here, the bull trap, where it broke to the upside but still closed the week back within the wedge. And then the following week, sold off, broke to the downside. We did a kickback this week, and then started to sell off and close the week with a rejection of that resistance. So I think we've got more selling to come over the next few weeks in NVIDIA, weeks to months, basically. There will be up weeks, of course, but you know, I think the trend is going to start to set itself in motion to the downside on this one. So that's what I see there. PayPal, pretty obvious. We're breaking trend. I mean, the trend is broken, and we're continuing to the downside. Another down week, another weekly close below. Lower lows, lower highs. Netflix here, same deal. Weekly close. The weekly closes in a lot of these tech stocks was a bearish close, basically. It's a lower close. Breaking of support, you know, and that's just what I'm seeing across the board in many of these. KHC. So we're going to have to see what's going on here, because this one, I've got a lot of lines going on here that I definitely need to clean up. But this one, if you see what's going on in here, really this green line right here and it's right there was major resistance. And you can see on the weekly, when we broke down below it, we tagged it right there, broke down, came back, tagged it right there, broke down, came back, tagged it right there, broke down, came back, tagged it right in here, and then we broke above it. See this big impulsive break? So we broke above that, and we just traded sideways, and it looked like it was bull flagging, like it was going to coil, it was going to flag and then break to the upside, but it didn't. It broke back down, and that is a false breakout right there. So that's bearish. You know, that's pretty much as bearish as it gets. False breakout, and you can see the selling starting to accelerate. The candles on the weekly chart are getting bigger. So to me, you know, this thing is, well, I'm going to look at this 25 level. I think we get down there, see how this thing wants to behave down around there, maybe creating this inverse head and shoulders pattern. We might take a shot at it down there. But if it can't hold that, we're going to make another leg lower, and this thing's going down substantially more. And then there was Zoom. I don't know what's going on with this one. They just love Zoom. And yeah, I get it. It's an obvious pandemic trade. Makes sense. But I think that's priced in for the most part. But this thing's still uptrending, so it's what do we have here? Well, we've got this bearish rising wedge right here. We've broken to the upside. To me, I think this is the fake out move or the bull trap area. So what I'd be looking for is going to be very similar to NVDA. You can see on the weekly we broke up here. Zoom is actually broke above on the weekly, but what I'm looking for on this is a breakdown. I'm not going to anticipate it because I don't see it yet. There's nothing in the charts that tell me that this is going to break down. But if I see that breakdown in Zoom and we come back down to within the bearish rising wedge, then that sets Zoom up in motion to start to break down down to the bottom of the wedge and actually start to sell off. So I'll be watching for that over the next week. But again, I don't see anything. There's some negative divergence in the PPO on the weekly, but not in the RSI. I don't see anything that tells me that it has to break down here. So until then, it's bullish. XOM is very interesting to me because we're seeing some really negative price action in XOM. If I zoom in here on the weekly, you can see maybe we're going to hold here. We have this down channel right here, and it doesn't show that clean on the week because it's a pretty tight channel. But you can see on the daily here, just this downward channel. We broke out and did a back test, 2 of them actually on the day, and held above that. So that we might see some upward price action in XOM, maybe come up to this 41 area resistance. But if I go to the weekly here, I just want to point this out. In the Great Recession of 2008, which is right here, from the highs to the lows, ExxonMobil fell about 41.5%. In the dot-com bubble of 2000, right here, the ExxonMobil fell about 37%. So far, in the bear market that it's been in, from the highs going back here in 2014, this was really when it started the bear market. ExxonMobil, as of right now, is down about, let's see if I can mark that out, about 64%. So pretty big drawdown. I can't find a drawdown that's nearly as big in the really some of the history of ExxonMobil going back. This is 1974. So we're seeing some real changes there in that stock. Someone asked me to point out Slack, and I don't have enough history here on the weekly chart to really give any kind of longer term analysis. When a stock's so new, there's just not a lot of history. There's usually a lot of volatility as the stock kind of tries to figure out what its longer term trend will be, and we just don't have that right here. So I can't give an analysis on this one. On the weekly chart, I could look obviously on an hourly and a daily and try to find something, but this is our weekly video. Someone said look at XLP. Yeah, it looks like a good short. Here's a uptrend that we had, kind of this blow off top from July. On the weekly chart, you can see it just continuing to walk up, but it was capped by this. Yeah, this kind of is a shooting star. It's a doji. I don't remember the exact name of this one. Like a inverse dragonfly or something. I don't know. There's lots of names, but the point is, it's a doji. It shows indecision. It shows that the market ran all the way up here, and then the seller stepped in and sold it back down. And it's kind of a reversal candle. This is where the sellers decided to step in and smash it all the way back down. And then you have 2 confirming candles on the weekly chart, really validating this. So to me, looks like this is going lower. But again, for the most part, large cap tech has been the leader. So I just have been using that as my guide, and the rest of the market will not hold up without the large cap tech stocks unless we see some massive rotation into all these other sectors, and you see financials and healthcare all start to rip higher, they just aren't strong enough to hold the market up without the tech sector. One thing interesting about this one, though, when I look at the volume, there's no selling volume. So this could just be getting started, because I don't see anybody coming in here and starting to sell. And you'd want to see that selling volume really start to pick up. If the moves don't end on really low volume. Let's just put it that way. Sell-off moves don't end with no volume. When you have a big uptrend like this, that has to be unwound. People have to sell out those positions, take profit, and you're looking for that selling volume. So we're not seeing it. I think it's still coming. Someone pointed out CRM, Salesforce. There's a potential short here, but we don't have the signal yet, but there's a possibility that we might get an island top cluster. I'm trying to find my pencil marker. But here's your cluster right up in here, your island. So there's your cluster. And if we get a gap down, Monday or sometime next week, as long as we keep the cluster up here and then we gap down, that's your island top reversal. And I've talked about how to play those, but the way that you'll play them, or the way that I play them, and is you short on the gap down. You can take the short, and then expect a back test. So oftentimes what they'll do, and you see it all the time, is you'll gap down, maybe you'll sell off a little bit more, and then they'll run it up and do a back test and run it back into the cluster. They'll trade it right up in here, trying to shake out anybody who took the short of the island top reversal. So expect that. Doesn't always have to happen, but it can happen. And then it should fail there. It should fail on the back test and then roll over. So I'll keep this on a watch list, and if we get it, I'll point it out. Okay, and we'll wrap up here. It's a long video. I was going through the comments trying to cover everyone's stocks that they were having me look at. Hopefully I got to most of them. We're going to wrap up with Mastercard here. All right, on the weekly chart with Mastercard, this is your uptrend that I see. Pretty solid uptrend. Lots of reactions on the weekly. And if you narrow it down to the daily, you can see here it's a little more acute. On the daily, you can see that it is basically just walking up this uptrend. We have not broken. The uptrend is still intact, and it is still, a valid uptrend basically. There's no negative divergence in this chart, so you can see the RSI continued to make higher highs as price was making higher highs. So the RSI was confirming the price action, not diverging from the price action. So there's no negative divergence. So in general, I don't see anything bearish. And when or if this thing breaks the trend line, that would be your sell signal. But usually you'll start to see divergences start to build before you anticipate a breakdown. So that's what I got on that one. I don't see anything else that is playing out. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Thanks, guys, for following along. I know it's a long video, but hopefully I was able to provide a lot of value and give a lot of content. In general, just my thoughts on some stocks and the market. And we're going to wrap it. Catch you guys on the next one.